Unless you want to stand up, you can do whatever you want. Still is a free country. It is a joy to be back in Ocala, and I'm delighted to be here. I was thinking about the things that are important in life, and frankly, being a granddad is pretty important to me. I've been spending 3 days off and have got to hang out with my two granddaughters. My oldest granddaughter is named Georgia Helena Walker Bush. If you know anything about Bush family folklore, her nickname is 41. And she's the joy of my life, like my other three grandkids. Georgia is something uniquely American. Her grandparents came from Iraq and moved to Canada. Her mom is Canadian. Her dad is a Floridian by choice, and American, of course. Her grandparents on my side, her abue is from Mexico, and I'm from Texas, which means, and that's in Texas at least, they think that's a different country. So 16, 17 years from now, when she fills out the census form, she'll say not applicable when they ask, what she is, because she's an American, first and foremost. And that's what matters. It is the only thing that matters. And we now have people on the left and right that break us up in our disparate parts, don't we? Barack Obama is a gifted man in many ways, but he uses this talent to push people down to make himself look better. The divide gets bigger and bigger. And then we have big people on the stage on our side that spend their time disparaging people, separating us in our disparate parts as well. And the net effect is we're not unified behind a set of common purposes. Our country doesn't do well unless we're unified behind a set of common purposes. And when we are that way, we lead the world. We lead the world when we act that way, and we're not acting that way right now. We need a no-fly zone in Syria. And for those all worried about, oh my gosh, Vladimir Putin, the big horse now that we're all supposed to be threatened about, he should be more worried about us than we should be worried about him. Anybody that embraces Vladimir Putin as a great guy doesn't know what he's talking about. The guy's a bully. He enslaves his own people. If you're a journalist in Russia, watch out. He invades countries. After we called Russia a regional power, within 30 days he invaded Ukraine and took Crimea. He terrorizes his neighbors in the Baltics with cyber warfare. This guy is not someone to be respected and admired. He needs to be confronted. We can respect the Russian country. We can respect the Russian people. But the only thing that guy can deal with is strength and consistency. Not blowhards, but someone who's totally focused on bringing back America, because our friends need to know we have their back, and our enemies need to fear us a little bit. The strategy continues with creating safe zones so that 4 million refugees aren't going across the straits into Europe, or 4 million people in refugee camps destabilizing potentially Turkey, Jordan, or Lebanon. Let them stay there under the auspices and safety of the United States and the Arab countries, and allow us to build an army that will destroy ISIS. That was the plan. But that requires calling it what it is. That requires calling it Islamic terrorism. That they have declared war on us, and we need to do the same with them. That has not happened under this president. He thinks that containing ISIS is a great idea. Well, containing ISIS, as he bragged about, led to the Paris attacks and then the San Bernardino attacks. Every day that ISIS exists in the form of a caliphate, they gain energy. They put a W in their column every day that they exist. Destroying ISIS is a serious undertaking and requires a serious leader. That means we need to rebuild our military, by the way, that has been gutted with the sequestration. And it means that when veterans, when men and women of uniform come back home, they have the best care possible with a VA that is focused on their needs. What we need to do is build the best possible climate for people to pursue their dreams so that they can earn success. That's how America works at its best. That means reducing taxes, reducing regulation, reforming how regulation works, reforming our career civil service system. There should be no lifetime employment in Washington, D.C. That Veterans Administration... VA has 340,000 employees. It ain't a lack of manpower that creates their problems. Perhaps it's too many people working in the VA. I don't know. But here's the deal. When they reduced waiting lists by not giving people care, and men and women died in the service of this country as veterans, they died because they didn't get the care that was warranted them, and only 3 people were fired, you know something is seriously wrong. And I promise you, should I be President of the United States, heads will roll out of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Who do you want sitting behind the big desk? Who do you want that has the leadership skills and the creativity to challenge the orthodoxy of our times, not just in schools, but in higher education where we have student loans now totaling $1.2 trillion, or social services that are exploding out, over $1 trillion of cost, but 6 million more people living in poverty than the day that Barack Obama got elected. Or a Defense Department that has never been challenged in terms of reforming it, and never been committed, having a commander-in-chief in the last 6 years that had the back of the military, instead imposing his ideology and his social views on top of a military that should be focused on keeping us safe and making sure that the men and women in uniform are trained and have the equipment to destroy whatever their mission is. That's the kind of... Look, you're looking for a big personality on the stage, there's one there for you. God bless you. He'll never be president. If you want to have someone who's a great talker, we did that for 7 years. It hasn't worked out. I hope you want someone who has proven leadership skills, who has a steady hand, whose compass points north, and who is grounded in conservative philosophy in a hopeful, optimistic way. With your help, I think you're looking at the next President of the United States, and I appreciate you coming out today.
I noticed at Disney a number of people are being displaced by H-1Bs. As a consultant, I find a lot of people joining me because they've been chucked out through the H-1B program. Now, I don't have anything against H-1B folks. They're nice people that come in. But the problem isn't that there aren't Americans that are willing to take those jobs. It's that there aren't Americans that are willing to take those jobs for $20 an hour.
Look, your point is something that I've learned on the campaign trail. One of the joys of campaigning is if you keep your head up and your ears open, you learn. I have a confession to make. I don't know everything. In fact, I've learned over now 62 years, nearing 63, that when you know what you don't know, you're a lot smarter than you think. And what I didn't know is exactly what you're saying. That's humility, by the way, a virtue. A few other candidates running for office, I actually... This is about the 10th time during town hall meetings that varying forms of what you're describing is coming up. And the law says that you cannot supplant American workers at lower pay. But the question is, it looks to me like it is happening. And there should be greater enforcement before we expand H-1B visas until this is worked out. You had the Disney case recently. They had to backtrack because they were outsourcing. What they were doing was contracting with outsourcing companies that would use H-1B visa holders. They would take out their entire IT departments. Well, that's backdooring doing the exact same thing that you're describing. Immigration should be a catalyst for high sustained economic growth for all of us. When it's not, it shouldn't be done. We should pick and choose who comes into our country, and it should be a benefit to everybody rather than have it be...
There's an elephant in the room that people are ignoring, and it's just there's a full-fledged investigation of Hillary Clinton for gross mismanagement of classified information. And a great danger is the hacking of her server by our strategic competitors and our enemies, China, Russia, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. And she is just not viable, and I trust that the FBI will be honest. These companies are fall apart if they give her a free pass.
So this is, I don't know, it's not necessarily the big elephant in the room, but the leading candidate for the Democratic Party is under investigation for doing something that made no common sense and may have violated the law. Certainly didn't pass the smell test. You're Secretary of State, you're dealing with privileged classified information, and you do it over your own private server without the safeguards. Here's the problem, the government safeguards aren't that good either. Look at the Office of Personnel Management, but how do you expect someone who is as untrustworthy as Hillary Clinton, who hasn't told the truth about this, to be honest as President of the United States? I think it's a huge opportunity for us to be able to do that. We found out about Hillary Clinton's emails because there was an FBI investigation. You found out about my emails because I published all 300 whatever thousand of them online. You can go to jebemails.com and you can open up the kimono if you like and see whatever's in there. I've written a book called Reply All that shows my 8 years of service as governor through the emails that I accumulated from people all across the state that wanted some stuff done. They were angry at me or liked what I did. I had an ongoing dialogue that was totally transparent and open. That's why I think to fix some of the corruption and mess in Washington, we just need to open it up and air it out. And being open and transparent is part of that. I'll never forget one of my first emails I got in 1999. I gave out my email address, and a lady sent me an email saying, I got a raccoon in my attic. What are you going to do about it? Nancy, I didn't think that was the duty of the governor, but she was down in South Florida, in Delray Beach, I believe. So next morning, I got this at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night. Next morning, I called up the city manager, who didn't think it was me, and said, we've got a problem, sir. Mrs. Smith has got a raccoon in her attic. What are you going to do about it? And animal control came to fix it. That's how you govern with a servant's heart. I don't believe Hillary Clinton has a servant's heart. If President Obama called me up today, he's not going to, but just a girl can dream. And I was governor of Florida, and he said, hey, take the Medicaid plan. No rules, no mandates, no requirements. Recraft the Medicaid plan for people of low income in Florida, and I'll give you all the money in the form of a defined contribution with CPI increase. I'd take it. I'd take it in a heartbeat because I know I could deliver a much better product for people that providers would like, they would actually take the Medicaid beneficiaries. Beneficiaries would be empowered to make decisions for themselves. They would be treated with more respect, and we'd have lower costs. Doing that alone, Medicare reform and Medicaid reform, would save hundreds of billions of dollars over 10 years. Hundreds of billions of dollars because their costs are explosive. Third, we need to shift as much power back to the states, not just Medicaid, but transportation, education. Give it back in the form of block grants. There are like 30 early childhood education, maybe 20 early childhood education programs. Florida has a universal VPK, voluntary pre-K program, that works. 80% of it goes to private providers. A lot of churches and synagogues depend on this. A lot of community-based organizations do great work at a lower cost. Why couldn't we take all that money and allow Florida's program to go even further? We don't do it because, God forbid, if Washington ever gave up power of something they probably shouldn't have had any say on to begin with. And so shifting power back. Finally, we need to have, as I mentioned, career civil service reform. We did that in Florida. We reduced the government workforce by 11%. If you just dealt with attrition, given the federal workforce is aging of its population, within 4 years you could cut it by 10%. But we need to go far more than that. And if we did those 4 things, we'd be on track to balancing the budget. And you can't deal with the debt unless you stop the out-year deficits that are growing at a fast rate.
What are your thoughts on how to combat the war on drugs, particularly the heroin epidemic?
Great question. This is a problem that I'm, again, wandering around. You see these things. And in New Hampshire, this is an epidemic, and it's growing across the country. Control the border, because heroin is coming in mostly through Mexico. It's high-powered, high-concentrated heroin, low cost, and it's supplanting now, instead of the gateway drug being marijuana or something else, it's supplanting opiates. It's supplanting Oxycontin and these other drugs that are prescribed by doctors. And people are replacing legal drugs with this drug because it costs less. So number 1, control the border. Number 2, do what we did in Florida. We created a drug control strategy that embraced the prevention, We created coalitions in every county. We expanded the amount of money going to drug treatment, because you have to provide help for people that are addicted to these highly toxic drugs, or they're gonna die. It's just that simple. You have to make sure that you're committed to the right kind of treatment, and law enforcement needs to be engaged in this. The one thing that we didn't do as much, because it wasn't as big an issue as prescription drugs are now, is get the medical community involved. You know that 90% of all the painkillers prescribed in the world are prescribed in America. 90%. The FDA just 6 months ago, I think, announced that OxyContin, or opiates in general, can be prescribed for kids. I mean, this is out of control. Everybody's, you got a problem, take a pill. And this is how you're creating this market that is quite dangerous. So it has to be a comprehensive approach. Here's what I know to be true. We're not going to do this from a top-down driven way. It should be bottom-up. Governors and mayors and police chiefs and sheriffs and the community itself need to be engaged in this, because it is embedded in our community. In this particular case, heroin knows no income barriers, no race, no ethnicity. I'm not going to ask people to raise a hand to know someone who's addicted to these powerful drugs, but I can promise you that it is pervasive across the board, and it has to be dealt with from a bottom-up point of view. And the first duty of a president is to keep us safe. That is by far and away, if you had to ask him to do one thing, it would be that. And it's not to put people in harm's way without a plan, without a strategy, without a clear vision of how you're going to execute on the plan, complete the mission, and leave. That to me is something that I'm reminded by. And I'm reminded by it as well. When I was governor, I made calls to every person I could find whose loved one died in the line of duty as a Floridian. Over 150 to 160 calls I would make. I did it every Sunday afternoon, and I just said, look, I'm praying for you. If there's anything I can do, I'm there. And to a person, except for one case, out of all those calls, everybody said, I appreciate the call. I appreciate the fact that you know that my child did not die, or my spouse did not die in vain. And we need to restore that in the United States. We need to be vigilant. We don't have to be the world's policeman, but we sure as heck better have the back of law enforcement and of our military, because we're living in an unsafe world. And I hope you want someone with a steady hand. Someone who's not going to be yelling and screaming and insulting people. Someone who's thought it through, who has a heart, who has a brain, and who has a spine. Because that's what we need in America today. Thank you all very much.
Please hang up and try again.